So, so revision control, it's really our collaboration tool as developers. It's our communication mechanism. It allows us, it's our safety net too. People don't realize it, right?
Oh yeah.
Revision control can be your friend, right? I would implore that you, on a daily basis, commit your code to your repository. Hopefully it's a branch or something on a daily basis, right? Because, I have literally come to work and found a white ring around my computer. And when I asked what's going on, they said, oh yeah, I caught on fire yesterday, so we hit it with the fire extinguisher. And needless to say, there was no code left on that box, right? That thing was done. And so, I will say from experience, writing code the second or third time is faster, right? But going back to revision control and pulling it out is even faster than rewriting it. And so what revision control does is it allows us to track our code, know what changes happen in our code, and collaborate. So Dustin and I can work together on code, and then the revision control system merges it together. It obviously cannot merge the same lines together and decide who writes better code, although we both know the answer is Dustin at heart, but we can't, the revision control system doesn't do that, but it does set up that collaboration framework, right? And so I used to do this really cool diagram in the past where I would talk about what most people use for revision control is a shared folder, right? And the typical thing they do in a shared folder is I'm working on file A, I write some code, I drop it into the shared folder. Dustin's working on the same code. He works in a different area. He drops file A in the shared folder over top of mine. And what happens is we're overwriting each other's changes. So all of a sudden Dustin's changes are in there and then mine changes are gone. And this iteration happens because there's no revision control merging them together. And what revision control will also do is say, oh, hey, whoa, Brian, we have a conflict. Right. And what it's trying to say is somebody else has modified the same file in the same line. You need to go figure out that conflict, because if we move forward with this conflict, we're going to toss out somebody's changes. And so if you ever work dealing with revision control and you see conflict, that means something to go look at. Okay. Ideally, we want to avoid it because a conflict is usually a sign where Dustin and I aren't communicating clearly about who's doing what where, and we're writing the same code in the same area. Right. And so we want to avoid conflicts, but it is a sign to collaborate on it.
Yep.
And so revision control provides that. It also provides history. Now, for those of us that are kind of smart about revision control, and we might have those managers that kind of want to know what we're doing, I like to write really nice, simple log messages when I check in my code. Right? Here's what I'm working on. I reference the ticket number I'm working on, and then I give like this very short, like one sentence. Here's what I'm doing. Like I'm talking to my manager. Because then what happens is, invariably 3-4 weeks later, my manager comes to me and says, Brian, what have you been working on the last 4 weeks? So I got really smart. I wrote this little script, and it would go pull all the revision control logs for my check-ins.
Yep.
And it would concatenate them all together, and I would email them this block, right? And then I'd moan and groan and make it sound like I did all this work, right? It was like one little script, and I copy and pasted it. But to write a summary of what you've done for a month, can you imagine like trying to remember? I can't remember what I did yesterday at work, but let alone a month ago. So you've got to go figure it out. So take time when you do revision control, put nice messages in there. Because the other thing that happens is Dustin will do a checkout. He'll see a conflict, and then he'll wonder, what was Brian trying to do?
Yep.
And usually the code commits that I see are blank on the comments, or it'll be like finished code, or my favorite, code compiled.
We get the weekly or the nightly check-in.
Yeah, nightly check-in.
Yeah,
try to give reference, because if Dustin can see, oh, Brian's working on this feature. Oh, I know why he changed that now.
Yep.
Or, oh, he shouldn't have changed that. And then it creates a communication point. He has now context. He can come talk to me. Okay. So he can see what's going on, and it creates that collaboration. And that's what the revision control is supposed to be, as a collaborative environment.
I think you hit on a key point that I want to highlight here is the ticket number. If you're using an agile tool to track your issues or track the user stories you're working on, that provides context too. I mean, the minute that I can go and say, okay, I have a conflict, Brian was working on this other ticket. Let me go see what this ticket was. What was he trying to work on? And why are we conflicting? Why are we working on the same files? We can immediately, resolve that issue. And I can do that kind of outside of even bothering Brian and saying, hey, what were you trying to do here by going and looking at the ticket? We've had multiple times on our project where people aren't putting the ticket numbers in. And then it's like, well, I don't know what you were working on. I don't know what you're doing, because it just says fixed code in your commit message. So it becomes very hard to collaborate.
these revision control systems, you can see like check-in histories, and you can start running metrics. So be careful, don't let your management start running metrics on it. Julio did this the other day. Did he tell you about this?
No.
So they were running metrics on one of our old repositories for the rental car stuff. And I think I might be able to find this thing. I think
was it like who committed?
Yeah, it was who did
changed?
the number of lines of code, and but the one that he found was the most interesting is the average check-in time. So he ran a report, and so he was able to pull a report on the code I wrote like 10 years ago, right? And he said, Brian, it was really odd. Your check-in times were evenly distributed throughout the 24-hour period. I had just as many check-ins at 2 in the morning as I did 2 in the afternoon.
That's
and
awesome.
So he printed out this graph, and there was this check-in, like, I've checked in the same number of lines on average 24 hours a day. Like, literally, he's like, there's no difference. Like, most developers, it's 9 to 5.
Yeah.
Right? He's like, oh my God. I'm like, yeah, well, back in the day, when we were small, like I would have to work in the evenings to get stuff done.
Yeah.
Often late into the night. So
especially if there's a production issue at 2 a.m.
Yeah. So he was running through the code and running history. He's like, oh yeah, you still had the most check-ins still. It was really funny in the disbursement. But where I'm going with that is you can start seeing some interesting metrics out of the revision control. But honestly, it's designed to be our tool as a developer to work for us. The other example I like to talk about, especially is when we start doing user interface development. How many times have you written a user interface, shown somebody, and then they tell you, oh, I really want to make these changes, right? You go make these changes, you show it to them.
This button should be blue.
Yep. And you show it to them. You spend, hours and hours changing it, days even sometimes, right? You show it to them. They're like, you know what? I was wrong. I really want to go back to the prior thing you showed me, right? And so if you do revision control properly, you just roll back your last commit or your last series of commits to the point where you demonstrated it before and you're there. But most developers don't do that, right? So then they have to go literally make all those changes again, right? Like I said, it's always easier the second time. Believe me, I've learned these lessons. I've done these things, right?
Well, again, I think you alluded to this earlier too. If you're using branches, off of a main line for everybody to be using, if you've made all these changes on a branch and then your management or your customers say, no, we don't really like that change, then you can go and immediately just go back to the main line and throw away that branch.
Yep.
Very easy.
Or move back or something like that.
Yeah. Or if you're doing commits, and have you committed the work in a meaningful way, you can just revert that 1 or 2 commits. It's very easy to do those types of things.
Yeah. So revision control can be your friend. How evil I was back in college. I actually had my own repository for my homework.
Oh yeah.
Right. And so I could go commit my homework, and this is before like the Google Docs and all were popular. But then I found I could access my homework anywhere. So if I, went to class and forgot it, I could go print it without having to run home and print it. So I could access everything everywhere through my revision control system. Or if I lost it or my computer broke or I deleted it by accident or the dog ate my mouse, right? Whatever your favorite excuse is.
Yep.
I had it, or I had a version of it, right? If I didn't like a version of a paper I was writing, I could go pull a prior version.
Yep.
Right. And so I found it was actually helpful for just day-to-day life, but I'm probably not your normal person there.
Well, like you said, Google Drive and the collaboration suites, like
It's
those
gotten
now
better
have
now, yep.
now they've got the history of the versioning
Yep.
in there, which honestly is revision control.
Yep.
Just hidden from the user for the most part.
Yeah,
which is
it's
interesting.
nice. Yeah, it's really nice. I mean, revision control is a tool to help us. And if we use it properly, it will continue to help us. So one of the things we like to do is walk through kind of the deployment process. Like we're going to make it simple. We're not going to do feature branches and stuff like that, but we're going to walk through what we're going to say is a typical revision control. I miss the days when we're in person. I could have somebody up on the board with a marker. So I've pulled up Paint on my screen. So if perfect, Pat's ahead of me on this already.
It's our pseudo whiteboard.
I love it, right? I love it. Pat's a mind reader over there. Right? He's half awake. You can't see him. I have it. It's in my desk. Yeah. I stole it. It was Nick's pen on his desk. He didn't even notice it's gone. He hasn't been to work in a year. I was struggling with the pen. For some reason, I'm better with the mouse, sadly enough. So let me do I'm going to do revision control. So most of the time, I'm going to make this top line time equals 0, right? I think I can do, look at this. I'm going to call it trunk they're using the word master now for,
or main.
Main is the other term. So if I can type, can people see that?
Yeah, it's a little small, but I know this is going to become big.
Zoom in one level. Does that get better? All right. Let's see. We've done that. All right. Let's see, guys. Bear with me. I'm going to see what I can do here. I select that bad boy.
You get drag and drop. Yeah.
I wanted to select the text. I don't know. Well, I suck at paint. We're just clearly demonstrating my inability to use paint. Where's the little hand thing? All right, well, whatever. We'll go with it. This is fine for now. All right, so we start with the trunk and the master. Let's see, kind of do a little shape here. All right, so now we're going to start and we're going to work for 2 weeks, right? So we're doing an agile development process here.
Yes.
We're doing 2-week sprints, right? Don't want to rant about anything longer than 2-week sprints. You know what? I'm going to go with 1-week sprints because I actually want 1-week sprints.
Let's go.
I want to go smaller, more agile, right? So after 1 week, we've committed a demonstrable amount of code. So I'm going to make my little dot here. Again, I'm going to demonstrate how terrible I am at paint.
A little small.
Yep, sorry. So that dot is the end of our sprint. We're 1 week later. So where's my little text? So we're going to deploy version 1.0.0.
Oh, Elijah piped up in the chat. Get quick stats for your average of amount of time.
Oh, is it? Oh, sweet.
Get quick stats. Apparently,
Nice.
Yeah.
I didn't come prepared. I should have had the printout that they sent me. Sorry about that. I just thought of it on the cuff. So here we have version 1.0, right? So what we're doing with the first circle here is we're going to tag the code. Okay, a tag is a snapshot in time that never changes. Think of like I got my handy dandy cell phone here. I'm going to snap a picture of the code, and that picture is that moment in time.
Yep.
You never change it. Never do it. If you find like yourself trying to do a commit on a tag, like just think of like Dustin standing on your shoulder yelling at you. Never, 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 right? Bad, bad, bad. So the tag, now you're defining that tag. Tag 1.0, that is there. Now, what we typically do is, and I'm going to have to do some more paint here. You guys are going to see how bad I am with paint. Oh, man.
So inevitably,
I can fill it in.
Inevitably, we're software developers. We understand this.
All right.
There will be something wrong that we did in our 1.0 release, and that we'll have to do some sort of a patch or a code fix, a bug fix.
All right. So 1.0, I'm releasing it. Let's see if I can do this. Now I'm creating. No, stop. Now I want another one. I suck at this. Have I mentioned how bad I am? There it goes. All right. How bad I am at paint. All right. There we go. So I'm now creating a branch.
Yep.
So
this is now the release branch.
Yep. So we're gonna do branch. It's kind of weird now. I don't know why it's doing that.
Make it a little bigger. Yeah,
there we go. I don't know why it's doing that. All right, this is my funky drawing. All right, so now we have branch 1.x, okay? So now it's important to note that the tag 1.0 is now that moment, it's compiled, we have deliverables, we're sending it off to be tested. Okay, now when we do testing, it's amazing, we're gonna find bugs.
Yep.
Okay, so let me see if I can do my little bug. So I always do this little like
X, yeah.
3 X's. We'll find 3 bugs in the code, right? No, don't drag that one. Now all of a sudden it wants to be my friend. Oh, there we go, right? Here's our 3 bugs, okay? So what do we do with bugs? We go fix them.
Yep.
Right? So we're going to write code, and pick your favorite place. Let's say we write the code on the branch because we're eager to test and deploy it. So now we need another tag here. See if I can do this good enough. All right, so we create another tag. Now
there is a problem with this.
Hold on, we'll get there.
Yeah.
0.1. I don't know why it's doing this now, but you know what? Usually we make fun of everybody else trying to draw on the whiteboard, but now we can just make fun of Brian trying to use paint.
Well, I mean, we understand now why it's so hard to draw on the whiteboard.
Yes. It's even harder to use paint. Pat over here is like he's like, oh my God, this is painful to watch. It's okay. He's half asleep. All right, so now we fixed the bugs. We've 3 bugs, so we fixed them, right? We've tagged a new version 1.0.1, and we'll talk about version numbering later. Let's just bear with me for the version number here. Now, that's on the branch. Now, what do we have to do here? Dustin's itching. Go for it, Dustin.
So, on the trunk or the main line, those bugs still exist because we found them within the release branch. And since we, merged or we created that release branch, we created that from all that tag. From that tag forward, no matter which branch you're on, those bugs will exist. So we need to pull those bug fixes back into the master or the main branch.
So we need to merge those fixes back.
Yep.
So that's the green line. So we're going to merge those fixes back to the main. If we don't do that, we make the job of our testers really simple because they always test the same problems they had previously. And it's really embarrassing when they find them in the next release. And we'll get there with the next release. You'll see how this works. And then it makes their job easy. They're really happy. Like, look at these dumb software developers yet again. They forgot to merge them.
Job easy.
Yep. Found the 3 bugs, and then they report it to their management all happy and proud. Like,
I found 3 bugs
yep,
again.
3 more bugs, right? And so with our agile paradigm, right, we're going to go write more code, okay? And when we write more code, we're going to spend another week, right?
We'll write more code while the testers test 1.0.1.
Yep.
Yeah, we'll let them test that now that we found those 3 bugs before we release it.
So a week goes by, and my timeline is probably not as even here, and my dot isn't as big, but bear with me, right? So what happens, a week goes by, we write some more code. Bear with me, I'm going to do 2.0.0. We'll talk about version numbering later. Might not be the right theory if we talk about version numbering, but bear with me. So now we tag the code. We're tagging the code again so that, why? So we can have a release number that the testers can refer to.
Yep.
Because if we don't tag it, what do they say? There's a problem on master. When did the problem exist? It existed at 2:33 UTC time. Remember UTC time?
On Tuesday.
On Tuesday, right? So now but I fixed that at 2:01. Is it in there, right? Well, the tag creates a snapshot so we can go talk about that code. We have a reference. We can build that code. We can test that code. And more importantly, we can go deploy that to production, right? Because, how long is it going to take us to forget that it was 2:30 on Tuesday that we deployed this code to production and we have to go back and make a change to that code? What's in it? Well, everything from before 2:30 on Tuesday. How does that sound, right? No, that's not very professional. So we want everything in this branch. It's the tag. So version 2.0, here's the tag. Here's the code that goes with it. And then we can branch off the tag to add more to it, right? We would never change a tag. Okay, so here we go. Let's branch off of this, right?
Create another release branch.
We've got another release branch. Look at that. I'm getting straighter with the lines. It's looking even better. Do you think I can do this? It's going to be terrible, right? It's not going to be even close to straight, is it? It's close enough, right?
Close.
Not too bad. All right, so now we're going to create branch 2.x, and I have no idea why it's doing that weird. All right, now we have branch 2x. All right, what do we normally have to do still? All right, let's go find some bugs. All right, but these are going to be new bugs because we merged our code. So we have new bugs, new opportunities. We're going to call them opportunities. We're going to have the opportunity tester opportunity fund. All right. Look at my X's.
Keeping those testers employed.
These X's are perfect. These are great. I'm terrible. All right. At least everybody can laugh at my paint drawings, right? Yeah, I'll print this and hang it on the wall to laugh at forever.
All right.
Pat is like our graphics person too, so he's like visibly hurt by this. He's like
twitching.
He's like,
That's the lack of sleep in my eyes.
He's like, I am trying to make you guys more professional, but I showed up this morning and you did this. I'm never a lover again. Like if you see him come grab the chair and throw me out, you'll know why. Right?
It's just the hook.
He's been helping
Pull you
us
off
get
screen.
more professional with these presentations, and then this morning happened.
Yeah, the cane.
Yeah. Whap, whap, whap. I can't help these guys anymore. Did you see Brian in paint this morning? All right. All right. So now we've got the 3 defects. Okay. We're tracking them. Now we're going to fix them, right? We're great developers. We fix them. All right. So let me get my handy dandy tag. So we
fixed them.
We fixed the bugs. We've done a great job. Okay. Now we're going to do another handy dandy tag here. What version number is it? 2.0.1. Good job.
Woohoo.
Sweet. Now, oh God, here we go. I'm getting there. Now, this is where it gets real interesting. We're going to get into merging, Dustin, right?
Oh, yeah.
You want to take it for the merging?
Sure. Well, let's see. We'll throw it to the audience. We're on a little bit of a lag here, but what branches do we need to merge these fixes back into? And we'll give it a couple seconds here just to have people jump in. But yeah, so as we move forward, we've got branch 1.x and the main line. And because we found the fixes after 2.0.0, we need to merge it back into both of those branches. Because those bugs probably exist within the branch 1.x, and they probably exist within the 2.0.0. Or at least we need to go figure out exactly which branches those things those bugs are in. There is a case, potentially, that those bugs are not in the 1.x because it was something that we introduced between 1.0 and 2.0. But more than likely, they are bugs that we have already had within both of those branches.
Yeah, so where Dustin's getting at is if the testers actually missed one of these bugs.
They could have been there already.
Yeah, so it could have been in there previously. So if they missed it, that means it would actually need to be merged into the 1.0. And that means we have a problem. Let's say that 1.0 is in production here.
Yep.
All right, where's my little...
Your dot.
I'm going to do this. This is how we put things in production in Paint. Yeah, version 1.0 is in production now, guys. Oh man, we might be shafted. It's not in production now. No idea what it is now.
I just retype it. It's baked in. You're gonna have to write it again.
Yeah. All right, we're gonna have to deploy to production again. We have a botched deployment, folks. All right, first deployment got botched. We'll see if we can. Oh, there we go. All right, we're in production now. We had a partial deployment. Look at these problems. Pat is over there visibly laughing.
Yeah, so if those bugs that we found on the 2.0 branch, if they were in the 1.x, for example, if they occurred before we tagged 1.0, then we need to merge it back to the 1.x branch. If it's something that if it's a bug that we had after the 1.0 branch, if it's something that we introduced in that second sprint that we had, then it only needs to go back into the main line because it doesn't actually exist on 1.x. And so this is where you have to be careful when you're merging between all of the branches because you have to figure out exactly what you want.
Well, and this gets more interesting. So let me get to, I love adding the third week here.
Yep, we got a couple questions in the chat here.
Questions?
So Matt's asking, if they missed it, wouldn't you want to merge the fixes into branch 1 and the main line? Absolutely.
Yep. Yeah, that's
absolutely.
That's what this second line is when they mix it.
And then Mohammed also asked, why would you need to branch 1.0 if it is identical to main?
So it's only identical to main at that moment in time.
Yep. So after the 1.0 tag, 1.0.0.
So right here,
you have that blue X that Brian added to the main line. That would be new code that is no longer in branch 1.0 or 1.x and is only on the main line until you tag 2.0. And then it is going to be in the 2.0 branch and the main line.
Yeah, I mean, if you're the only developer and you're doing all this on your own and you know you've stopped coding, yeah, it might not make sense. But in the real world, definitely, we're usually on a team.
There's multiple people.
And usually the team is itching to write more code. Right, you know, there's the one person that's helping with CM that's doing some of this. Everybody else, as soon as they tag, they're off. They're like writing more code from that instant. They're on the code keyboard writing away, right? Yep. So that snapshot is changed immediately almost. And usually it doesn't even compile when they tag it.
Right. So for our example here, you don't need to merge the fix for the blue bug back into 1.x because that does not exist on that branch. That would only go back to the main line. But the other two X's, let's say the two other issues, let's say the testers missed it in the 1.0, you would have to merge those back into the 1.x branch.
Whoops, I'm on the circle here.
Yeah. So this is where it starts to get pretty complicated. And one of the best practices that we have as well.
It would be better if I did it like this so you could see.
Yeah, there you go.
That bug has to be merged up because it happened prior to this.
Yep. So one of the best practices, and this is more of a release cycle issue than a revision control issue, is you don't want to be managing all of these branches all the time.
Well, don't get ahead of us yet.
Oh, do we have a note about that?
Okay, there. Hold on.
All right.
So let's do one more deployment, and this is that it's pertinent to what you're talking about now.
Yeah.
So we're working on another week, 1 week sprints. My dream, right? I'm dreaming. Most of the time they're 2 weeks. 3 weeks is just not acceptable. I'm sorry. If you're doing 3 week sprints, those are marathons. I hate them.
So
I'm adamantly opposed to them.
So that's the question.
Tags 3.0.
How do you know where the defect came from? So one of the ways that we're able to debug that and figure that out is running the same set of tests across the different the different branches. So for example, let's say we identify that the defect was in, the 2.x branch. We'd have to go and test the 1.x branch and the main line to see if the bugs were in there. If it's something that we then identify is in, all of these different branches, Brian's going crazy here.
All right, so I'm making our 3 bugs, right? So
Yep.
we tagged. Whoops. Oh, I'm screwing things up here. Hold on.
So you can't just look at the code necessarily and know, oh yeah, it's in here or it's in there. Most of the time what we're doing is working with the test team to figure out and testing multiple versions across multiple environments to figure out exactly where those bugs are.
So I'm getting ahead of ourselves. So we tagged. Let's branch. All right, let me do my branch real quick here. Whoops, something spelled wrong. Oh, we have a
Failed branch.
That branch failed. There's another branch now. My mouse skills. There we go. All right. So we've branched, right? So now what I was trying to do, and I'll do it a better job now, is we're going to create 3 bugs. Oops. Oh, geez, I'm terrible. Paint skills. I'm getting ahead of myself. Get so excited here. All right. So here's a bug. Put it in a different color. We'll help everybody.
Testers found it on branch 3.x.
Yep. And this is actually quite common, right?
Yep. Like, oh, hey, this has been a bug the entire time, and we just now found it. Yeah, okay.
All right, we'll do different colors here. Because we can't put it in front of 3 because that would imply that it's not even
That's
in there.
new work.
Yeah, it shouldn't be in there.
Well, I mean, we can talk about that, but
I think we have enough problems to solve already.
yeah, I think so.
All right, so now we have 3 new problems or opportunities here, right? We have bugs that have occurred in different spots. So where do we merge each of these 2?
Yep.
So this first one, it existed before, right? So this is where it gets complicated, right? So when we have, we're on branch 3, now we're finding defects. Now we have to research to figure out where they came from. So let's say we did the research. I topped the screen already. Let's see, that's a touch screen. See, look at that.
Uh-oh. He's touching the screen. Leaving dots.
See, I could use my pen, and I'm even worse. My hand's not stable. See how terrible I am. So now we have to research, right? And now we have to figure out, okay, so this first bug is way back in the day. So it has to be merged to all 3. Oops. All 3 different places, right? Because it exists everywhere. Whereas the yellow one exists between 1 and 2. So it does not exist in 1, right? And so what I do is there's a little finger test. If you take here,
Ronnie, we'll get to your question once we're
and
done
you
with this.
slide your finger up, look, it hits 2.0 and it hits 3.0. So it doesn't hit 1. So you only need to merge. Whoops. Oh, God. Oh, man.
Oh, no.
I've really messed up now.
The merge was broke.
No idea why it's doing that. All right, let's click off of that. See if it'll let me. There we go.
Nice.
All right, so for yellow, I need to go,
Yeah, it's after the 1.0
Yep.
release.
and then I need to go to main, but it doesn't have to go to the 1. And there's a question. I'm sorry.
Yeah, we'll get to that once you're done with the merges, because that's we can get Walsh on his soapbox.
Oh God, you don't want to ask that question, do you? All right, yeah, I love that, man. Let me I get a name and address. I'm just kidding. All right. So now we're getting to the third one, right? So if I put my finger here, right, and I'm sliding it down, it only hits 3. So I only have to merge the third one back to the main. Okay. Now you see how making all these decisions is time consuming,
Yeah.
right? So the more branches we have and the further behind we are getting things out to production, the more work as a developer we have to do.
Yep.
And the more opportunities we have to forget merges. See how many lines there are here? It's very quick and easy,
6.
right?
6 different merges for those 3 bug fixes.
I run over to Dustin's desk at lunch, say, let's go to lunch in the middle of merging things. He's like, sure, let's go out to lunch. Of course.
I'm going to forget the 4 that I started.
Yeah, we have this huge lunch. He loads up on dessert. He comes back fat and happy, and he falls asleep in his desk right after lunch. And he's like this sugar high. He doesn't remember anything that happened that morning. So he immediately moves on to his boss, Pat, runs over with this emergency because these never happened. There's a problem in production. You got to put the fire out. So he goes and he does that. Mm-hmm. And the next day he comes back and he realizes he was merging stuff. He's like, I must have been done. So he just moves on.
New code.
Yep.
I got new code to write.
Merging's not fun. I'm moving on, right? So he just moves on, right? So now we're in this weird state. We don't know where everything's merged to. The testers, they're going to have a field day with version 4.0.
Yeah.
Right? They're going to find errors everywhere, okay? And this happens because people don't follow the process. Now, this is my shameless plug, right? So if we automate, where's my little circle here? I need to find some color that I'm not using here. All right. So if we can automate our configuration management process, so automate our tags, automate our deployment to our staging environment, right? And here's my shameless plug, automate our testing, right? So this is all push button, deployments. If we have automated tests, right? Those tests run sub-second. If we find problems, we add more tests.
Well, even better, the tests automatically run out of band, so you don't have a human spending time doing them.
Let's say they run every commit, right? Every time you do a check and they're running. So you're automatically testing your code.
At that point, it doesn't matter how long they take, assuming that they don't take forever.
Yeah.
You have them not running with a human. You have another resource to go and use to do something else more productive.
Yep. So if we automate those, let's just say they take a long time, an hour in computer times, right? That's a long time, right? So let's say this automated test, automated deployment, they take an hour, right? And they pass. Right now, if we automate our deployment process to production, right, most of the problems we see in software are people problems, human problems.
Yeah.
Right. If we automate things, we're removing a lot of the opportunities to have human problems. Okay. Now, if we automate this process too, now our time to get things to production are automatically, with the automation shrinks.
Yeah.
So now if we're able to move things to production faster, right? So now what happens if during this whole process?
Now, again, I will say the one thing that we can't automate is fixing the bugs.
Yep,
obviously. That's the one thing that we still need the developers to go and do manually.
Yep.
But then all of the automated processes to go and retest those things should be automated.
So let's say we deployed branch 1 to production in our example here, and the automation happens, it was quick. We come back to our 2 weeks later for branch 2 here, okay? Now, if it's an hour to test and deploy, right? If we just move that to production right away, right? We do another deployment to production right away. Do we care about merging anymore?
To 1.x?
Yeah.
We don't care about the 1.x branch
All
anymore.
of a sudden, merging becomes inconsequential. Same thing, if we get to 3.0 here, if we get to 3.0 and we can deploy within an hour or a day, then the merges go away, right? So automation allows us to get rid of a lot of the merging nightmare because we know we're going to go to production right away.
Yeah.
We don't have 7 weeks, right? I'm looking at Ronnie here. We don't have 7 weeks to wait and fix problems in production during that 7 weeks. So the longer our time to getting our production code out there, the more opportunities we as developers have to make mistakes and the more distractions we have to development because we're being pulled away to fix things in other areas. So without getting on my soapbox too much, I'm already there. Automating testing, automating deployments, automating all of these processes around development help us developers be more productive. The other thing it does, and this is where a subtlety is, management, right? Every time we make a human error, we actually decrease our management's confidence in us. So by automating, we're improving our management's confidence. Like every time we have a deployment that's botched, they want to slow down and not do another deployment, be more careful, right? So we're going to be on week 20 of our deployments because, whoa, slow it down. We keep making all these mistakes. Well, as we make these mistakes and we're on week 20, now we're going to invariably the next deployment is going to be botched because we're 20 weeks behind.
Well,
right? The further that gap is, the worse it's going to get.
The more time between release cycles, the more code that has been put in, which means there's the potential for more bugs to go and fix.
The higher potential, right? It increases, and it increases exponentially as you add more code. So,
and we're not saying our developers are bad, but everybody makes mistakes. And that's okay.
Yeah. Even with testing, there's going to be stuff. And so what I'm going to say is you're going to have to add more and more automated tests. And you're going to, every release, you should be adding more automated tests because you should be adding new code in theory, right? So you're going to improve upon this, right? And there's going to be things that go to production. And the answer is, oh, yeah, we just wrote another automated test to fix that in the future. So we'll identify it. It doesn't mean that everything's going to be perfect. It just means our processes are continuing to get better. It's the agile mentality, right?
Yep.
And we have more time to focus on development and processes because we're doing this automation.
Right.
And so that's the argument you need to make with your management. So I'm going to look at Ronnie's question now. So how about 2-week sprints turning into 7-week sprints because the head of production refuses to release if everything isn't perfect? Well, so my argument here, Ronnie, to your question is...
Yeah, he said he was just venting, but...
Well, you should still do 2-week sprints.
Right.
Your release cycle can be different from your sprint cycle.
Yep.
Now this would, I would also argue too is that it depends what you're trying to do, but the whole agile framework is designed to have things not be perfect, but be moving forward. Now there is, I'm going to say there's a difference between perfect, acceptable deploy to production and unacceptable deploy to production, right? There is definitely an instance where I would say, hey, that code's unacceptable to push to production.
Right.
But there are acceptable cases where there's workarounds or, we're getting a feature out the users really need, but it might be a little buggy. There might be a few bugs in it that we know about. That's okay sometimes to push it out to production. I think it gets to how you manage their expectations.
Right.
And so, I would argue that if it takes 7 weeks to be perfect, that would probably mean that you're doing some of those fixes as part of the agile process.
Right.
So they would be in your 2-week sprints. And I would argue towards, you have to figure out how to prioritize, right? Prioritize and get those things to push things to production faster because that makes your life easier.
Yeah.
So.
One of the agile improvements we made when we released that one product to production for those 4 weeks that we had debug on is that we actually added a set of story points to the sprint to help work with production issues. Because we knew we were going to be getting into that situation. So we immediately said up front, hey, we know that we're going to be spending some time fixing production bugs. Let's account for that.
Mm-hmm. And so I want to step back at the 50,000 foot level. Like, why did we do this diagram today? Right? We want everybody to understand that, you're going to write code on the trunk, the main, the master, whatever you want to call that. And honestly, if you have a team of just 5 people, there's going to be continuously, merges in there. It's going to be very active. Right? So the whole concept of tagging and branching to do your deployments is needed. A lot of people do feature branches, and that's fine. We don't want to I struggle with Paint enough to just do it with just this simple example. We start adding feature branches, and it gets more complicated. But the concept is you still need to do tagging and branching for your releases to be professional, and that allows us to account for these things. And if we follow those simple processes, it allows us to release. Imagine if we didn't do a tag. Right now, we're saying, oh, wait, no, stop writing code. Stop.
Code freeze.
Code freeze. We have to get it to compile. Oh, wait. We need to wait 7 weeks to get everything where we can do our release. So if we take Ronnie's example, I'm going to pick on Ronnie's example here is let's say we have a team of 5 developers. Well, now we've got 3 developers working on fixes, 2 developers that are told to work on their own box on stuff, and they're not going to be doing merges.
Work on your own long-standing branches.
It's going to be a disaster.
Yeah.
And we're going to propagate problems because we're not following a process. So, and I'll say the other dirty secret is I'm usually the guy that does revision control on the team because I push this simple process, right? And everybody thinks I'm God, right? Because I know this thing that takes an hour to teach everybody else. And really, it's because nobody else wants to learn it. Nobody else wants to do it. It's not hard.
Boring.
Yeah, it's boring. It's the things that nobody wants to do.
Yep.
But these are we talked about differentiator skill sets. These are differentiator skill sets. Nobody wants to learn it. I've taken the time in my career to learn the crap tasks that nobody else wants to do. And everybody thinks I'm smart. I'm not really smart. I just do the crap tasks. And I do them really well so that I can spend less time on them.
Yep.
And I automate the crap tasks because that way I don't have to do them a lot.
Right.
And, you know what? When push comes to shove, who do we need on our team? The people that know all these weird, odd tasks and knew how to, they know Linux, they know how to do deployments, they know how to revision control, all these things that we're focusing on, are the things that people want on their team. Nobody wants to do it. So be that person. Then you're needed more. And then you learn more about the process.
Yep. And to Matt's question we have in here. So he's asking about managing expectations and whose responsibility is that? Is that Is that the product manager? Is that the developers?
So let me. I literally was just having a ranting session on site about
I
managing
assumed
expectations.
that you wanted to take this one.
So
yeah, no worries.
So I think that it's everybody's job to manage everybody else's expectations. It's my job as a developer to manage everybody around me's expectations, the developers on my team, the managers on my team. It is my manager's job to manage the points of contacts that he deals with, the expectations. As a developer, I shouldn't be jumping my manager and talking to the end customer and managing their expectations.
Unless told to.
Yeah, if I'm told to, that's fine.
Right.
But I should be managing my direct managers or my tech leads' expectations. And so then he understands, right? Here, it's very simple. If you want to know if you've done a horrible job managing expectations, it's obvious right away. If somebody is surprised by anything you do, you have mismanaged expectations, right? Now, if all week it's Scrum, it's stand up, and at every meeting with your manager, you're like, man, I'm falling behind on my task. I'm really getting pulled in all these different directions. I don't think I'm going to complete my task on time. I don't think, and then you get to the end of the week and you say, I didn't complete my task on time, and he's surprised. Like, that's his fault for not listening because you've said it 7 times or 5 times, right?
Yep.
All week you've said it. If all week it goes like this, Dustin, I'm on track. And then Friday, I missed my deadline horribly because I've been working on all these other things you've been asking me to do, Dustin, right? And you're surprised by that. Well, whose fault is it? It's mine. I didn't manage Dustin's expectations throughout the week. I have to tell him these things. And so everything in life shouldn't be a surprise, right? If you're going to be out on Friday, don't wait till Thursday to be like, Dustin, I'm out tomorrow. Right now, that's a surprise. Say, okay, you know what? In 2 weeks, I find this is what I have to do. In 2 weeks, I'm going to be out, Dustin. It's on that Friday. I'm doing this, right?
And just had this conversation.
And then literally like a week later, I need to repeat it. Hey, Dustin, remember I'm off this Friday. Because when I tell him 2 weeks, he's like, yeah, that's in 2 weeks. I don't care. That's literally what went through his mind. It literally went. And then when a week later, I remind him, Dustin, remember I'm out this Friday. He's like, yeah, I kind of remember he said that, right?
Yeah,
and then Thursday, when I go to Dustin, remember I'm out tomorrow, he goes, oh, crap. I know you told me 3 times, but I forgot. Okay. He's not surprised by it. Now, he mentally is surprised because he knows he forgot that fact, but he knows you've managed his expectations for that, right?
Yep.
And so managing expectations is our job on a continuous basis to the people around us at home, right?
Yep.
Manage expectations with everybody around you at home, right? Manage expectations for everything you do and find out nobody should be surprised around you, right? If you're doing a good job managing expectations, nobody should ever be surprised. Right. And that's a simple measure. Right. So it's everybody's job to manage expectations. It's your job to manage the people around you. If they don't do a good job and there's a surprise, that's on them.
Right.
Right. That's them. But managing expectations is huge. I think there is a book on the Rising Leaders Challenge series on managing expectations.
Yeah. I believe the book is called Managing Expectations.
Yeah. It is one of the few books I can't find on audio.
Yeah.
That I love that book.
We have a copy here in the office. I know.
Yeah. Sadly, early in my career, I was horrible at managing expectations. I know that might be a shock to everybody, right? And I read that book, and
Problems
it was one of those
opportunities.
Yeah. Well, it was one of those terrible things where you read the book and you're like, "This is so obvious. I'm a moron for not knowing this." Right? Like I read books all the time when I get this concept, and they're like, it's a great author when they make you feel dumb because you're like, "Wow, I can do this," right? Versus, "Wow, that's too hard."
Yeah.
But managing expectations, it's a communication thing. It's just learning to be honest with yourself, right? Most of the time I find developers aren't honest with themselves. No, I'll get it done Friday. Oh, no, I'm good. And then Friday rolls around and it's like, it's not even close, right? It doesn't compile. It's not even near where they're at.
Ideal situation, they could have gotten it done by Friday.
Yeah.
But everything
it's not going to be done by next Friday.
No.
Right. And
not at all.
Manage expectations. And really what I say is don't lie to yourself. Be honest with yourself about where you're at.
Right.
And so, Dustin and I were just pushing, with Agile is story pointing and more importantly is being able to understand how long things take. Right. I need to know as a developer how long things take me to do or other people to do so that I can estimate my own tasks. And someone just told me they're horrible at it. I said, well, you need to get better. They said, why? Well, you have to be able to know how long things takes to manage people's expectations properly. And someday, if you ever want to be a tech lead and your manager comes and says, how long will that take? I don't know. When the developers get it done, do you think that's the answer he wants to hear? right? No, he wants to know, like, it's one thing to say 2 weeks and it takes, 2 weeks and a day, but to tell someone 2 weeks and it takes 2 years, I mean, I'm thinking you're not going to have a job at that. If somebody told me that about 4 weeks later, I'd think I'd be like, all right, it's time for you to find a new career or job, Dustin, or something like, there's something about
And it
being
shouldn't be
totally
predicting
wrong.
the stock market.
Yeah. Yeah. So managing expectations, I can rant forever. I think it's a good one.
Yeah, Ronnie put another comment and they were using Subversion as well.
I don't mind. I mean, honestly, it's a tool. I grew up using Subversion.
It's better than shared folders.
It's better than shared folders. It's better than CVS.
Yeah.
Git has some better things to it. But honestly, if you can use Subversions and branching and get a lot of the same things you get with Git.
It might be a little antiquated. It might be a little harder.
But you can still accomplish most everything. It's how you use it, right?
Yeah.
And without getting too much on my rant, manage expectations. Really, I find in life, it's not what you do, it's how you do it. Mm-hmm. And so have those hard conversations.
Yep. So that is
huge. I mean, going over budget, over timeline, it's a bad thing, and you have to manage people's expectations. Mm-hmm. I mean, imagine let's hit home, right? Imagine if the school came back to one of you college students, right? Most people are in college, and said, "Well, we told you it was going to be $10,000 for this semester, but we found out that the cost was really $50 million at the end of the semester, so we're going to send you a bill for $48 million, right?" You'd be like, well, what do you mean? Like, that's not fair, right?
Yep.
And so essentially as software developers, when we blow our budget by 2 years and blah, 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 that's what we're doing.
Yep.
And so imagine the poor customer, right? The word surprised wouldn't even be like big enough, right?
Disappointed,
right?
angry.
So imagine that. So that's where it's our responsibility to be better at these things.
Yep.
So.
And I mean, when we're talking about over budget and, very, out of bounds when it comes to our predictions, I mean, part of the reason why we push Agile and why we try to, have our teams run Agile as much as possible is because you are able to manage those expectations on a 2-week basis.
Well, and manage expectations up front too.
Yes.
Right. I mean, literally, I was yelling at my developer team the other day, right? They missed the deadline. And they said, we didn't think we could do it from the start. I was like,
why didn't you say that in planning?
Yeah,
why
don't ever agree to a deadline.
Yeah.
Don't ever agree to a deadline. And if it's a forced deadline, somebody else, like, go in and say, look,
we
I
think
we need 3 weeks. Like, or, like what I'll say is, all right, fine. You guys think, how can we do it in 2 weeks? Right.
Yeah.
Like,
what is blocking us?
Do we need more resources? What do we need? And then let's have that hard discussion day one. Yeah. Because it's a lot easier for me to go to my management day one and say, look, guys, this is not going to take 2 weeks. We need 3 weeks at best. And likely we're going to need 4 weeks.
Yep.
Right. And it's easier to manage that expectation up front. But if 2 weeks down the road we miss it, and then everybody on that team says, I know we're going to miss it, right? Like, I'm surprised, but now I'm pissed, right? Yep. Now I'm like, wait a minute. It's the secret that everybody's keeping from me.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And you don't want to be that. Have that hard conversation day one. As soon as you think there's a problem, just raise the concern, right? Be that person on the team that is open and honest, right? How we do things, the how is always hard, right? Usually the easy thing to do is the wrong thing. Because usually it's the ignore it, let's not talk about it, we'll wait till it's a problem, right? And that's mismanaging expectations. It's not doing the right communication. Do the hard thing. Have the open, honest communication. Because what I hate, the other thing that happens was all the time, I'm mentoring somebody and they fail a class, right? Literally, we deal with this out here. I've seen multiple college students come to me and they come and they say, Brian, I'm not going to graduate this May. I failed differential equations. That seems to be the one, right? And I'm like, what do you mean? Like,
and this is in April, May timeframe.
This is usually like a week before the end when there's nothing that we can do about it. I'm like, do you realize we have like 35 college students that graduated last year sitting out here and they all passed differential equations. And I would get 34 of them to help you so you don't fail, right? Let me know about a problem so I can help. Yep. Like, I'm not upset that you're failing. I'm upset that I missed an opportunity to leverage the 34 people sitting in our office to help you succeed.
Yep. Right.
And it's just as a leader in a software team, like, I want to know ahead of time because I want to be able to help. Like, we are going to all sink in the ship together. Let me know.
Yeah. Right.
And so make sure you let your management know. And if they don't appreciate it, you're working for the wrong organization. I'll just say that. Right. Yeah. Have those hard conversations and have them in life in general. Solve those problems. So, all right. So I ranted enough about this. Hold on, Pat. I'm saving this for you. Okay. Dude, I'm saving this paint.
Matt, I think to your point as well, I think most of us were thinking that. Yes, Cyberpunk was another example of managing expectations.
There's a ton of
yeah.
like we don't have to look hard and
No.
long for managing expectations. So I did promise that we would talk about version numbering, but first I do want to talk about one other thing: repository structures.
Yep.
So it doesn't matter what skill or what technology you're using. There's generally, if you look at repository structures, most people start as a monolithic repository. Can we share my screen again? Well, here I'll.
And this is going back even to the Subversion days to talk back to Subversion.
Yeah,
You'll
my
see that
example is in Subversion. So
we're using SVN as the.
So hold on. My example will cater to Matt. Is it Matt that was
no,
using?
Ronnie.
Ronnie. All right, Ronnie.
Yeah.
My example will cater to you. All right, there we go. I'll make it a little bit bigger here. All right, so most of the time we start with this monolithic repository structure. Oops, I lost my tabbing. Bear with me. I can't do two things at once here. And this little keyboard's terrible. All right, so most of the times, so our Subversion and Git examples, doesn't matter. You still have a Git, or in Git you still have the master, the trunk, the main, whatever you want to call this. This is that. And so usually within there, most of the time we start off with one project, right? And if the team is horrible and they fail, they're disbanded and we get rid of them. So this isn't a problem, right? But most of the time we have awesome teams. And what do we do with awesome teams? We give them more work.
Yep.
Right? If you're on a team that's not getting more work, well, look in the mirror. You're a bad team. So good teams get more work. So typically it starts with this. They have deliverable A, project A, whatever you want to call it. And then they're rewarded with project B, and then they get project C. And next thing you know, they have a ton of projects within their project or within their repository. And that's when we get to this monolithic repository. That's a sign of a good team, to be honest with you. They're doing a lot of good work, right?
Yep.
So
You're
then
getting more and more responsibility.
Then we do branches. Remember, if you branch, everything gets copied over in the branch, not just what you're releasing. If you're releasing one of the products, branch everything still. And that's gotten better with a lot of the automated branching and a lot of the automation, because in the past, a lot of this was done manually.
Yeah, so SVN, you had to copy the files over manually yourself. Git handles it very differently with the way that it handles
it's all automated,
the branches.
so
well, it's to the point where you branch and the files are the same because you're all pointed at the same place.
Tags are handled automatically. And so tags, same thing. So what you end up with is this trunk, tags, and branches where all the deliverables in it, monolithic. Everything's in there, monolithic, right? In the term.
One repository.
And I will say this is not an industry standard. I'd like to make it an industry standard. This is a Brian standard that we've portrayed out to our organizations, and we've used it. So it does get a little religious, but sorry, there's no other standard, so I will create it. So now, if we move down here, let me see if I can get my, hold on. Well, that didn't work real well. My notepad skills are still desiring improvement. Oh, geez.
They're better than your paint skills, though.
Oh, yeah. My fingers are a little cold this morning, so they're getting trigger happy. All right. So now we have a deliverable-centric repository. So I think it's been about 5 years now. There was this really big push to make everything deliverable-centric.
Microservices.
Yeah, microservices. So then there was this weird push to make every repository deliverable-centric, right? And I'll get into that in a minute. But so deliverable-centric is where you have one repository for each product. So within each, then you have your tags and branches. So instead of having multiple projects here, you have a separate repo for each project, right? Now, so what I was asked like 5 years ago to go take all these monolithic repositories and turn them into deliverable ones, right? And so I did it for a few teams, and let me tell you, it was a horrible experience. It didn't work very well because all their scripts didn't work.
Part of that too is if you already have a structure, don't try to change it halfway through. That's part of the problem that I've seen, at least, because I've also seen deliverable-centric projects if they start that way, can be successful.
Well, and they're a lot of work because like then you have to release everything separately, but a lot of times they depend on everything. So like my team was complaining that like, look, when we release like all 40 of our projects, we now have to release 40 and do 40 separate versions, right? So it was easier when there was 40 projects in one, right?
I think there's pros and cons of each.
Well, and so there's this novel concept, right? Use the monolithic where it makes sense. And if here's what I'm going to suggest. If there's an instance where you want to share a library that you're working on with another team or do collaborate, break that one library out until it's deliverable centric so you can collaborate. Because here's the secret. A lot of people are like, well, I don't want to let Dustin into our code base because I don't want him to see how horrible our code. I mean, I don't want to share our code with other people. So a lot of teams don't want to let people into their monolithic repositories because they think their either IP is too awesome or their code stinks so much they don't want
Or
people
both
to see
at
it.
the same time.
Yeah, or some variation of those, right? But it usually comes down to that.
Yeah.
So in those cases, just break off that one project into a deliverable centric and have both.
Yep.
Right? For some reason, years ago, they felt like we had to have one or the other. They couldn't have both. And so the solution is just use both.
Yep.
Use the tool as you need it, right? As
Yeah.
designed. So we have a few of those.
Again, this past week, just talking about this because we have in one of our projects, we do have the delivery centric repository set up. So what we end up doing is we have, delivery A, delivery B, delivery C. And with this second project that we've now taken on, we are now seeing parts of the delivery, the deliverables from the deliverable centric project that we can go and reuse as part of.
Oh, that's awesome.
And the second project is a monolithic repo right now. So we can go and say, okay, well, we want to use the alert service, or, we want to use the notification service.
Yeah.
And those end up being the deliverables that we're able to use. And we can say, hey, we've got this code over here. It works pretty well. How can we make this, usable and share it with this other project or this other team?
Yeah, I find code reuse it causes the evolution of code, causes the evolution of our skills as developers. Usually it's not a copy. Well, never copy and paste reuse. That's really not code reuse. I won't rant forever, but that's a terrible pattern. Breaking it out and reusing, though, a lot of times what we find is when we have to reuse it, there's subtle changes to make it more reusable, more configurable.
And usually it makes it better.
Yeah, exactly. It makes it better. And it makes us better because now we're learning how to do that from the start.
Yep.
And so our design skills improve in that concept.
Yep.
So I won't rant forever about it.
Yeah, and again, hit us up if you guys got questions about the monolithic versus deliverable centric, because I think there's a huge debate on the internet as a whole, talking about the differences and pros and cons of all.
Well, it's clear this is the only way to do it. We are clearly the right way. We are clearly beyond debate, right?
Yeah.
No, and I'd like us to get to like some sort of terminology that's a little more common. I don't care what it is. I've chosen monolithic and deliverable just because it's something people relate to.
Well, it also, if you talk in terms of like microservices too, that's not always the concept that people are used to. So if you try to like sub in microservice for deliverable centric, it just doesn't work. Deliverable centric ends up being a more broad term that can span multiple ideas and still drive that concept home.
I hear they're using the word macroservice now.
That's just a monolithic repo. It's just a monolithic app.
We always swing to
Fat
tab.
app.
Yeah.
That's the term that the colloquial term we use is fat app.
Saying that.
Yeah.
It's like the marathons for anything over a 2-week sprint.
Yeah.
I can rant forever on that.
Yep.
One of my teams is currently doing 3-week sprints.
Yeah.
If you have a mid-sprint review, that's a sign of a problem.
Yes.
All right, so we're going to switch over to version numbering, right?
Yep.
So version numbering, right? So I put a little example up here. Typically, you're going to see like some sort of like 4-digit number, okay?
So 4-digit numbers like this, we refer to as semantic versioning.
Yeah, there you go. Perfect.
Yep.
So now, this first number, 1, right? We all know what it is. It's called the major version number. And for me, this is the easiest one to describe, okay? So, and one of the things that we're going to talk about is backwards compatibility, right? And new features, right? All right, so when you do a major version release, so you're going from version 1 to version 2, there is no expectation of backwards compatibility. So I'm going to say no expectation, right?
Yep.
New features, there is yes and mind-blowing. Let me use that word, right?
Drastically different.
Yes. So like if you're going to go to a new version, and I will rant on my high horse, I love to use Apple or Mac as the example here. Early days of the iPhone, like they were doing mind-blowing changes every release, right? Not so much nowadays, right? I'm going to get all this hate mail. But
they're a little less.
But I think the early versions, Apple, when they did a lot of their products releases back in the Steve Jobs days, they did a great job of having major releases. Their announcements were huge, and it would do like really cool, mind-blowing new things, right? Like I always joked about like the iPhone, like 12 would be something that would like, it'd be like a phone and a hoverboard in one, right? Because they were just changing things at such a rapid pace. And
Cook your breakfast too.
Yeah, it's a really good example of a company that was evolving with these huge releases every release, right? And so I like to use that as an example. And there's no expectation for backwards compatibility. They changed the power plug at one point. That's okay, right? Like, you know, as a consumer, you know, that doesn't make me happy. I have to go buy $100 new cable, but like from an expectations management, that's what comes when you do a new version, right? So if we talk about 2 here, right? 2 is a minor version number.
Yep.
Now, get my handy dandy copy, paste. All right, so with a minor version number, what's our expectation of backwards compatibility? What does everybody think? As I erase this. Chat's kind of dead, guys.
Well, we got a lag.
Oh, there's a lag. Oh,
You got to remember the lag.
I'm impatient. Did you guys notice that ever? Right? Like the world's most impatient person. All right, so backwards compatibility, right? So typically when we're releasing a version like 2.1, 2.2, 1.1, 1.2, there is backwards compatibility is absolutely an expectation.
Yes.
Right?
Yes, it is.
Nothing should change when I just do a simple upgrade, right? You know, it should have the same plugs. It should work the same. So there is a backwards compatibility expectation. New features for a minor version. Yes. Why am I getting it? If you're not doing anything better for me, why would I want it, right?
Yep.
So minor version number, there is an expectation for backwards compatibility and there is an expectation for new features, right?
Right.
So if we get to 3, now this is where we get into the debate. There's a little bit of debate on whether it's a bug fix or a build number. I'm gonna do the
patch
revision number versus build number.
Mm-hmm.
So the third number in some semantic organizations is really your revision number. And so a lot of times, let me get my handy dandy copy and paste here. So backwards compatibility, absolutely yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, usually there are not new features, it's bug fixes.
Yeah, or security patches.
And so we kind of referenced this. Remember when we did our little example in our paint diagram, we did 1.01. So if we're not getting new features, we're like security is a great example, right?
Yeah.
It's not a new feature to the user. Like it's not going to do anything new. You know, it's not. There's no new buttons. There's no new cool like make me breakfast in the morning.
Yep, the app should function the same way it did previously, but
except
better.
actually work.
But better, yeah.
Yeah. Like the bugs are fixed, or there's the security hole. We're not giving away your data, like, or we're not leaking something, right?
Yep.
So that's what the 1.01. Now, if a minor release can have new features and bug fixes, but if it has new features, then we roll all the bug fixes up and call it a minor release most of the time.
Yep.
Right now. If we go to the 4.0 number, a lot of times they were calling this a build number, right? So why was that important is a lot of times back in the day when we had like Solaris and different flavors of Linux, you would have to do a different build for each flavor of Linux. So you'd have to reference the build number. Oh, that was for Solaris. That was for HPUX. So a lot of times the build number is less meaningful these days.
Yep.
So like you saw us, we were doing 3-digit numbering there. So a lot of people have now switched to 3-digit numbering, or the 4th digit's always a 0. I feel like, you know, I'm kind of lazy. So if it's always going to be a 0, let's leave off the dot and the 0 and save 2 digits every time.
Completely agree.
So I think the build numbers kind of become less used. I'm going to say there's always an exception to rule. There's always a need for it, but in typical industry, we're not using it as much. Now, let's have a conversation here. Just like logging, the build numbering system is intentional. You have to stop and think about it. Right? I just had an argument with a team the other day. They did basically a major release, and they called it 1.6. They literally changed the technology, right? That we were interfacing with them in Java, and they changed the interface to JavaScript. And the interfaces weren't backwards compatible. They were completely different. Do you think that fits a minor release number from 1.5 to 1.6? No. And when I talked to their tech lead, he's like, yeah, you're right. I'm like, can you fix it? well, we automated our scripts. We just increment from 1.2 to 1.3 to 1.4 with the script every time. So the next release will be 1.7 because we just script it. Like, no, that's a fail because it doesn't communicate to us what's going on.
Right.
I know, like it's a life standard, not just a software standard, right? And I refer back to Apple. Like, when you get those and everything else in life, if you start looking at when they do releases, you have these expectations we've outlined here in life.
Yeah.
And like, when I go to upgrade some app on my phone or my computer, if I see it's a minor release, I'm really quick to just, oh yeah, cool, it's fixing something. Just click it. Now, do I expect it to crash and not work anymore? No, right? I'm expecting it to be better. Right. Our expectations have been managed. We've talked about managing expectations, that this is what happens. So as developers, we need to step back and make sure that we're implementing these common sense default practices in life, because the best thing that you can do in life are the things that are known, well understood, because there's little room for communication error if we follow the standard. If there's not a lot of standards in life, but if we follow the standard, right, we're clearly communicating. If I drive on the wrong side of the road, how do you think that's going to end? Pretty poorly, because we have this simple standard, right? Yep. And everybody follows it and it works. And if I don't follow the simple standard, right, I have horribly communicated with people and it usually ends very poorly, right? So follow these build numbering standards and think about it. Make it intentional. Oh, is this a minor release? Is it, is it a bug feature? Like, follow those simple things, right? Make those simple intentional decisions, and your communication just is assumed, right?
Convention over configuration.
Yeah, and nobody can come back to you and say, Brian, it's not backwards compatible when you release 2.0. Like, yeah. No duh. Like, I got a Saturday class for you. Maybe you need to go to this class, right? Yeah, I mean, so those solve a lot of our problems that way. So that's our version numbering.
I was gonna say, and this extends beyond just developing services or developing applications. This is also used for libraries, frameworks that you're using. A good example that I find is Angular, the Angular JS library or framework, however you want to describe it. They have they follow this in that Angular 1 and Angular 2 are not compatible. You can't migrate and expect the code from Angular 1 to work in Angular 2. And so for Angular 4 even, they follow that, and that they are not backwards compatible. They are huge sweeping changes in fundamentals of how to use those frameworks.
Well, it's interesting, even to another real world example, I bought another wireless headset the other day. Yeah. And it's the newer version. It's a minor release version of the one I had before. And I was like, oh, wow, a lot of things were fixed. Like, it now syncs up easier. Like, when I switch, it works. Like, like
but
I thought it would.
It's the same plug, right? It's the same plug?
No plug. That's the best part.
Oh, yeah. It's the same interface.
Relatively same interface, but the experience is better now. Right. And so I'm like, oh, wow. And then, like, we joke now when I walk over and get coffee, Julio can hear me now.
Yeah. Because before it was very crackly.
Yep. And so they fixed a lot of these different, and it gets rid of a lot of the background noise better now. Now he's not like, turn yourself on mute, the
blender's on.
Yeah. I think that'll still pick up. But it does echo a lot of the background noise. So again, that's a very good example where my expectations were met. I bought a newer version and it just got better. Everything was the same, but it got better. Right. And so that worked. And I gave the other set to my kids. They stole it. So